case we have never met, I'm Michael Price, and I want to help you succeed in growing your business.
Welcome, I'm Michael Price, your host.
And I'm Nancy, your co-host.
Imagine waiting, literally waiting weeks for a government contracting officer to finally approve your pricing.
Oh, yeah.
A nightmare.
Right. You've gone back and forth. You've submitted all the paperwork. You finally get that green light. But, and this is the worst part, a month goes by and you realize your customers still can't see a single thing you're selling.
Yeah, they're completely blind to it.
Exactly. All because you missed one, hidden update button buried in a totally separate system. So today, we are cracking open the FAS Catalog Platform, which we'll just call FCP today, and its integration with eMod. So welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Our mission today is really to decode this massive stack of highly technical documentation so you can actually get your catalog published without, completely losing your mind.
Yeah, because honestly, navigating these two platforms feels less like updating a catalog and more like, negotiating a delicate diplomatic treaty between two completely different software architectures.
It really does. Right. So we're going to look at the three main catalog file types you have to choose from. We'll uncover the hidden reasons why the system archives certain data while just, completely erasing other files. And we're going to walk through the exact step-by-step workflow to actually bridge FCP and eMod.
Which is huge because for anyone out there managing a government contract, understanding the why behind these systems is the ultimate shortcut.
Oh, absolutely.
If you know why a file takes an hour to process or why the system suddenly just splits your data into a million pieces, you stop fighting the software. You avoid the bureaucratic delays, the rejected MODs, and those invisible catalogs we talked about. It's basically like organizing a massive warehouse. If you don't know which loading dock to use, your inventory is just going to sit there.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because the first major hurdle you face before you even really log in is choosing your weapon, right?
Yeah, exactly. You have this format showdown right out of the gate. Looking at our sources, the entire foundation of the FCP system really rests on choosing between three things. You've got product files, services plus files, and price proposal templates, which...
PPTs.
Right, the PPTs.
So let's start with the most common one, the product file.
Yeah.
Because based on the documentation, this seems to be the default for, standard retail.
It is. It's really the workhorse of the platform. You use the product file if you are selling commercial off-the-shelf items. COTS products or highly commoditized services.
Okay.
Basically, if your item is going to be sold directly on GSA Advantage, where a customer can literally just click Add to Cart on a specific item page, this is your mandatory format. It replaces the legacy systems you might be used to, like the old SIP application.
Got it. So standardized office chairs.
Yeah.
Laptops, basic hardware, that all goes right into the product file. But what if my business is entirely service-based? Like, I'm not selling office chairs. I'm selling hundreds of hours of IT consulting or specialized training courses. The customer isn't, adding a person to a digital shopping cart.
Right. And that brings us to the second format, the Services Plus file, or SPF. This is specifically engineered for labor categories, fixed price services, training courses, language services, stuff like that. But the documentation highlights a really fascinating technical distinction here. The Services Plus file is also used for actual physical products that just aren't suitable for direct sale on GSA Advantage.
Wait, really? So how does the government buyer even know what I'm offering if my items or services aren't listed individually on that GSA Advantage storefront?
So FCP handles the visibility totally differently for the SPF. Instead of generating individual product pages, FCP uses your Services Plus file to automatically compile and publish a conform price list in an Excel format.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so that overarching price list is what gets pushed to GSA Advantage, eLibrary, and eBuy. So the buyer downloads your entire master menu to see your offerings rather than browsing item by item on a web page.
So if the product file is like the standard retail storefront, the Services Plus file is like the master service menu.
Exactly.
But then we have this third outlier in the docs, the price proposal template, the PPT.
Oh, the PPT. Yeah, the PPT is the rare exception. And honestly, the system treats it like an unwanted guest.
Like it doesn't even want it there.
Pretty much. It's used exclusively for exceptionally unique offerings that simply cannot fit into the structured rows and columns of the product or services plus files.
Like what kind of stuff?
Well, the primary use case our sources highlight is for travel, transportation, and logistics services, usually called TTL. Those specific special item numbers, they require a highly customized, bespoke GSA template.
Which makes me wonder, if the government wants standardized data so badly, why even offer the PPT at all? I mean, if my items fit in the storefront or the menu, I absolutely shouldn't be using the special request form in the back room, right?
Right, and what's fascinating here is how the system actively tries to push vendors towards standardized data. Standard data allows for automated market research and way faster procurement cycles.
Which everyone wants.
Exactly. In fact, the system has a strict priority rule hard-coded right into it.
Oh, really? How does that work?
If you accidentally submit the exact same item in both a PPT and, say, a product or services plus file,
Oh, I bet that happens all the time.
it does. FCP considers the standard file to be the authoritative source. It will completely ignore the PPT version of that item. It only tolerates the PPT when it's absolutely legally necessary.
So if FCP is actively trying to force everyone into these standardized product and services plus files, there has to be a tangible reward for the vendor, right?
Oh, there is.
Because if I comply and use the structured formats, what does that actually buy me in terms of processing speed when I hit submit? Looking at the publication timelines in these sources, the outcomes differ wildly depending on the file type you pick.
Well, the reward for compliance is automation. When you submit a product file, FCP triggers an automated compliance and pricing report, the CMP report.
Okay.
The software automatically scrapes market research, comparing your proposed prices against this massive database of other government and commercial prices. That machine-driven analysis takes up to 2 business days.
Wow, just 2 days?
Yep. And the moment the contracting officer looks at that automated report and hits approve, your item's automatically published to GSA Advantage.
2 days for automated market research, then auto-published. I mean, that is a massive operational advantage. Does the Services Plus file get that same VIP treatment?
Similar, but with a slight variation based on the data type. The Services Plus file also auto-publishes upon approval. It pushes that conformed Excel price list out to the public platforms automatically.
Okay, so what's the catch?
However, it does not receive the automated CMP report. The system runs data integrity and business rule checks, but because services are highly variable, the pricing validation can't be fully automated in the same way standard product pricing can.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Which brings us back to the PPT, the unwanted guest.
Mm-hmm.
If I submit a PPT, I assume I'm losing all of those automated perks.
You lose everything. Automated everything.
Yikes.
PPTs require a totally manual, line-by-line review by the contracting specialist or officer. There is no automated market research report to speed up their job. And crucially, and this is the hidden trap you mentioned at the very start of our deep dive, items submitted via a PPT do not automatically publish to GSA Advantage or a library after they get approved.
This is that invisible catalog nightmare. The contracting officer says, "Congratulations, your pricing is approved." But the actual government buyer still can't see it. Why?
Because for PPTs, the vendor must manually initiate a completely separate software action in FCP called a Terms and Conditions File Update, a TNC update. Yeah, you have to take your newly approved PPT items, embed them into your TNC text file, and submit that secondary file for another round of review.
Final round.
Yep. And once that TNC update is finally approved, it takes an additional 1 to 2 business days for the items to actually become visible to the buyers.
That is a staggering difference in workflow. If you just stopped at the initial approval, assuming the system worked like a product file, your entire catalog update would just sit in a digital void.
Just floating there.
Right, but looking at the sources, regardless of which file you use, there's one major bottleneck that unites all 3 formats, and that is deposit into eMod. The documentation states that getting a file from FCP to eMod takes up to 1 hour.
Up to an hour, yeah.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. In modern software, a digital file transfer should take like milliseconds. Why is there a 1 hour delay?
Well, it really comes down to system architecture. FCP doesn't just shove the file over a live connection instantly. FCP is a newer platform, while eMod is frankly a legacy system.
Ah, right. Old tech meeting new tech.
Exactly. So to bridge them securely, FCP performs an hourly polling job. It's like a scheduled digital handshake where FCP checks eMod for status updates and, available deposit slots.
Okay.
Plus, the eMod system has to do its own heavy processing to ingest, save, and display the files within your specific modification number. Network latency, database indexing, and the queue of thousands of other vendors all pile up to create that 1-hour buffer.
Okay, but here's where the architecture gets really terrifying for a vendor. The sources mention a very specific system quirk regarding file size limits in eMod. If I upload a massive catalog, what happens?
So eMod has strict legacy file size limits. It just cannot handle massive single files. So if you upload a comprehensive product file or Services Plus file into FCP, specifically anything over 100 megabytes,
FCP intervenes.
right? FCP intervenes. It automatically splits your content into multiple smaller files behind the scenes before depositing them into eMod.
Wait. So if the system unilaterally slices my 150 megabyte pricing spreadsheet in half, how do I know it didn't just completely corrupt my data?
That's a valid fear.
Like, how do I know it didn't slice a row right in half or separate a product from its pricing tier? That sounds like a recipe for a massive compliance violation.
Yeah, and the designers anticipated that exact panic, thankfully. FCP has a built-in safeguard using a really rigid naming convention. When FCP splits a file, it restructures the data safely along clean row breaks. It doesn't just chop blindly, and then it automatically renames the new smaller files.
Okay, so I can track this?
Yep, you track it by looking at the generated names in your latest catalog data section.
But how does a file name prove my data wasn't corrupted?
Because the naming syntax is hard-coded. It outputs your contract number, an underscore, the file type, an underscore, the file number, an underscore, the total file number, and finally, a timestamp.
Oh, I get it. So if I see a file named, let's say GSA 6054 and products file 123240811, it's SLSX.
Exactly. That 12 tells you definitively that this is file 1 of 2. The subsequent file will naturally be 22. You don't have to break the files apart yourself. FCP handles the heavy data lifting, and the naming convention provides the audit trail to prove all parts of your 150 megabyte catalog arrive safely in eMod.
Okay, that lowers the blood pressure a bit.
Yeah, it's pretty seamless once you know what to look for.
So our files are formatted, they are processed, they're split by the polling job if necessary, and they are published. Let's fast forward. It's 6 months later. You are facing a pricing audit, or you just need to look back at exactly what items you had on contract half a year ago. Let's talk about the system's memory. What happens when we open the vault?
The vault, you are referring to the catalog file history page. This is your primary tool for version control and historical auditing. You access it by navigating to your catalog overview page, scrolling down to the latest catalog data section, and clicking the hyperlink for View Catalog File History.
What exactly is retrievable in that history? Does it just show the current state of things, or?
Oh, if you are using product files or Services Plus files, it is a complete historical goldmine. You can download previous historically published versions of those specific files. The interface provides a table showing the exact timestamp the file was generated and the total number of catalog items that existed at that specific second.
Wow, it's detailed.
And the most valuable feature is the hyperlink to the related action that actually triggered the update.
So it actually tells me the why behind the historical change. Like if I see a sudden drop in my item count, I can click the related action link and see that it was tied to a delete products modification I submitted back in, March.
Precisely that. You can map every historical file to the operational decision that caused it. You might also occasionally see entries labeled Product File Refresh.
What's that?
That is the system's way of telling you the file was updated by an internal administrator or an automated platform process rather than a direct action you took as a vendor.
Okay, that's really helpful. But notice you specifically said product files and Services Plus files are a gold mine. What about our bespoke friend, the PPT?
Oh, this raises an important question, doesn't it? The platform does not include previous versions of PPT files in the catalog file history.
Wait, at all?
Not at all. The latest catalog data section only stores the single most recent update for PPT actions. There is no historical vault for your special request forms.
And that completely destroys my audit trail. If FCP acts like a meticulous librarian keeping a record of every single change for standard files, but treats PPTs like an Etch-a-Sketch, where it only remembers the last thing drawn, that is a massive liability for a vendor. Why would they design it that way?
The reason PPTs aren't saved historically isn't a careless oversight. It's a fundamental architectural limitation.
Really?
Yeah, because PPTs are essentially unstructured data. They're highly customized PDFs or bespoke Excel templates. The FCP database just cannot index their individual line items the way it can parse the standardized rows and columns of a product file.
Oh, I see.
The database can only hold the latest raw blob of data. Historical versioning at the item level is technically impossible without that structured formatting. So it is another structural reality pushing you to avoid PPTs unless absolutely necessary.
Which brings us to the most critical part of this deep dive. We've explored the rules, the automated rewards, the file splitting quirks, and the historical limitations. Now let's give you the exact roadmap for the most important action you will take, actually linking your file submission to eMod. How do we execute this workflow without getting trapped between the two systems?
All right, so the very first step is entirely counterintuitive for most users. You do not start your work in FCP.
Wait, really?
Really? You must first log into the eMod or eOffer site and initiate the modification process there. The entire goal of step 1 is simply to generate a unique eMod ID.
Why not start in the catalog platform where the data lives? Why go to eMod first just to get a number?
Because eMod is the legal authority. FCP is just the calculator doing the heavy data crunching. You have to open the official legal request in eMod first to establish the container for the data you're about to process.
You know, I like to think of FCP as the compiler and eMod as the executable runtime environment. FCP is doing all the heavy lifting, validating the code, checking the pricing syntax, splitting the massive data packets. But eMod is the actual runtime where the contract legally exists.
That's a perfect analogy.
Okay, so I have my eMod ID. What is step 2?
Step 2 is where you bring that ID over to FCP. You navigate to the catalog overview page, select A+ new catalog action, and choose your file type. And this is where the crucial link happens. You use a specific drop-down menu on that screen to select the exact eMod ID you just generated.
Okay, so you link them up.
Yup. You upload your file, check the confirmation box acknowledging the data transmission, and press Send File to eMod.
And step 3 is where patience becomes mandatory. This is that hourly polling job we talked about earlier. FCP is processing the file and waiting in line to shake hands with eMod's legacy database.
Exactly. You must wait up to an hour. You will eventually receive an automated email notification confirming the transfer. Only then do you execute the second half of the handshake.
Which is going back to eMod.
You return to eMod, navigate to the Upload Document section of your specific modification, and physically confirm your file is finally visible in the Price Proposal Template section. You upload your standard cover letter, review the rest of your legal MOD, and hit Submit.
So, what does this all mean? Here's the number one trap I see vendors fall into based on this documentation. They think FCP is the finish line.
Yes, oh my gosh, yes.
They see approved or sent in FCP and they close their laptop and walk away. But FCP has zero legal contracting authority. It is purely a staging ground. If you don't complete the handshake back in eMod, hit Submit and wait for the contracting officer's review in Step 4, you do not legally have a contract update.
Exactly. The architecture enforces that strict separation of duties. The multi-step handshake ensures that the heavy validated data lifting done by FCP perfectly aligns with the contractual legal record maintained in eMod. It prevents unverified data from entering the master government catalog.
And we absolutely cannot forget Step 5. If you used a PPT after the contracting officer approves it in eMod, you must go back to FCP and initiate that manual terms and conditions update action just to make those items visible to the public.
The manual override tact.
The manual override tact, indeed. Well, we have covered a massive amount of technical ground today. We decoded the format showdown, comparing the automated direct sale power of the product file against the conformed price list of the services plus file, and of course the highly manual unstructured nature of the PPT. We explored why the legacy eMod system forces FCP to split your 100 megabyte files, and why the database architecture allows you to retrieve standard files from the catalog file history while treating PPTs like an Etch-a-Sketch.
And we laid out the exact compiler to runtime workflow. Always start in eMod to get your ID, take it to FCP to process the data, wait for the hourly polling handshake, and finish the legal submission back in eMod. Looking at all these sources, the overarching theme is really the relentless push toward automation. As government procurement systems become increasingly reliant on auto-generated market research and structured data indexing, it raises a really fascinating question about the future of government contracting.
What happens to the outliers?
Exactly. Will the demand for streamlined, standardized data eventually force every unique, highly complex business offering into a rigid, one-size-fits-all digital box? Or will systems like FCP always be forced to maintain a clumsy manual override like the PPT process just to accommodate the sheer creativity and complexity of how private businesses actually structure their services?
That is a phenomenal question to leave you with. Can true business innovation actually be standardized into a product file, or will we always need the unstructured back room? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep mastering the architecture, keep learning, and keep asking questions. We'll see you next time.
A special thank you to MarketUS.com for furnishing us this information. You can reach them at MarketUS.com or call them at 954-636-3232. Before we go, this deep dive was created by the MarketUS.com team. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. It's right below the subscribe link. Thank you for watching. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor and sharing your product or service with the world, reach out to MarketUS.com. You can schedule a session to discover how we can work together. See you soon.